Welcome to Value Added 616's module on Lean Six Sigma and the organization. I'm Dr. Luke. I'm the co-founder of Value Added 616. So what I want to talk to you about today is Lean Six Sigma in the organization. What does that look like? So as a basic introduction course, what is it going to look like within our organization? What are things we're going to need in place? Who do we need in place? Who do we need to know that can get us the resources that we need? Who should the team members be? What type of projects are available? These are all things that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes with Lean Six Sigma and the organization. So first I want to talk about elements of success. So if you're going to have a successful implementation at any sort of organization, there's a few things that we need to have in order. One, support and participation from the top. So as most of us are going to know, if you've been around the industry for a while, in any industry, this could be Department of Defense, this could be corporate America or in a banking institution, doesn't matter. If there's not support from the top for something, whether you're doing Agile, Lean Six Sigma, or whatever it is, if there's not support, it's really going to start to fall apart. You really need support from leadership, otherwise resources won't be allocated for your particular program. So the next thing that we're going to need though is to standardize the management of all these efforts. So you can't just put Agile into place, Lean Six Sigma into place without having some sort of infrastructure for it. So we want to have something in place, not just the training, but we need to have our coaches in place and make sure that everybody knows their particular roles and jobs. Now it does begin with training, but it also begins with a structured approach to what this Lean Six Sigma is going to look like at your particular organization. Now remember, this is a culture, not just a series of tools. So we got to standardize those efforts. We also have to have allocated resources. How frustrating is it when somebody asks you to get a particular job done or say, hey, go solve this particular problem, and I don't even have the resources to do it. It could be time, money, people. But I need to make sure that I have allocated resources in order to get things done. What about aligning this stuff all throughout the enterprise? This kind of goes back into that bullet about standardizing the lean management efforts throughout, is we want to make sure that the projects we're working on at the process level are feeding up vertically to make sure that they're at the process level, aligns with the business level, aligns with the enterprise level. So we want to make sure that there's strategic alignment for all these lean principles and the projects that we're working on across the enterprise. We also want to make sure that we're making data-driven decisions. So enough of this whole gut feel or I don't like this. Understood, but let's back that up with data. So there's data available for just about everything in this day and age. I mean, it's 2022, we have plenty of data. So we're going to be using the define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, the DMAIC process to say, what are we going to do with that data? How are we going to use it? How are we going to translate it? So we're going to learn to be storytellers with our data so we can make decisions that can be backed up. And then we want to make sure that we're sharing our information and knowledge. And what that looks like, if you have a knowledge management portal, a learning portal, whatever it looks like at your organization, we don't want to solve problems and then have to go solve them again 3 months later, or 6 months later, or even 3 years later. So when we share information and knowledge, we grow. And that's the idea, is we want to make sure that we're continually moving forward, right? Progressing. We don't want to keep solving the same problems over and over. Now, those are the elements for success, but what about some barriers that we have to success? What are some things that generally hold us back from having a successful implementation? Scope too big. Well, this happens actually even at the project level itself, and yes, this does affect the entire program. If I'm constantly getting projects that say, well, we're going to go take a look at the mortgage lending process and we're going to, revamp the entire thing. Well, that's really like a core value stream, and you want me to take that on all at once when the scope just gets wildly out of control. Or we start working on projects and we have process owners and champions and sponsors, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we have our leadership is telling us, oh, well, you're doing a good job with this. Now, can you also add this into your project? The scope keeps growing and growing and growing. We call that scope creep. So we got to watch out for the scope. Unavailable resources, we addressed a minute ago. If I don't have the resources, but I'm told to solve a problem with nothing, it's great, I can come up with great ideas, but I can't really implement them, and it makes it extremely difficult. What about politics? There's politics in a couple of ways. We deal with government clients and civilian clients, so sometimes politics, we have to deal with Congress itself. So maybe we're talking about politics at that level. Maybe there's some sort of mandate that happened. But then the other one that's also just as common is actually office politics. So I know this goes without saying, but when you get into a culture of servant leadership, which is where Lean Six Sigma really needs to be, then we don't worry so much about that. But when we worry about office politics and jockeying for position, and I want to do really well in this project because it'll get me to the next level or get me seen or viewed by my bosses, you know what? That's also going to help this process improvement program to just implode and just blow up on itself. So let's just make sure we leave politics out of it. Conflict. Now, conflict is addressed. I know there's plenty of classes and courses that every organization has on how do we deal with conflict. Now, if you notice, I said how do we deal with conflict? Not if it's going to happen, but when. We know that it's there. As a matter of fact, there's a healthy level of conflict, but what do we do with that? Well, in Lean Six Sigma, we give you some of the tools and techniques because it's so important. You're having a bunch of brilliant minds coming together to solve complex problems. Guess what's going to happen? I don't agree with that person doesn't agree with me. How do we come to common ground? How do we move better for the greater good? And so we need to learn how do we effectively manage, deal with, and squash that conflict and grow from it. So that's the idea behind conflict. Uninvolved leadership, again, coming from that past slide we just had a minute ago. When the leadership is not involved, there's literally a roadblock in your way. I don't even want to say a speed bump, for instance. You're talking about the brick wall. That's what the graphic is for on this one. That is them putting a wall in front of you and kicking the ladder out from underneath you. Because they're saying, yeah, go ahead and do this process improvement stuff. Well, that's good in theory, but with no support, you're going to find that this process improvement program or this continuous improvement program, again, is going to fall apart. Wrong people on the team. So as you're going through training, ideally what you're going to find is people that are cross-collaborative teams, right? You're going to meet new people. Maybe marketing is working with mortgage lending, and maybe they're working with credit cards, or maybe they're working with folks on the shop floor and machining. Whatever it is, you want to choose the right people for the right projects on the team, the right training, the right subject matter experts. And I say that because what you're going to find is a lot of times we're going to go, oh, hey, Frank's my best friend, so I want to have Frank on my team when we're doing this. Frank might not be the best person. And guess what? You just added waste into your process. So that being said, the wrong people on the team can be very corrosive to our efforts, and they can hinder it quite a bit. So as we're talking about the team, before we get to some of those additional team members, let's talk about who are some of the leaders that we referred to. Who are some of the key players that we generally see in place inside of a culture with Lean and Six Sigma at its core? You have what's called an executive sponsor. And now mind you, from these slides, I'm going to be showing you, I'll say somewhat the book answer. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what a lot of organizations look like as they're growing. So an executive sponsor, you need somebody with some clout, some power, some pull, some influence. You need to make sure you have somebody in the program in higher level leadership that is going to help execute and develop that vision for the continuous improvement. So what is this program going to look like? How are we going to be allocated the resources? Who's going to be on the team? Who's going to get the training, right? So setting all this up, nurturing that culture. So when we're doing this big fundamental change to who we are, continuous improvement, Lean and Six Sigma, those are at the heart of it. That's a culture change. So you really need support from the top. And so the executive sponsor really helps us to make sure that that's being followed through. And they're helping to give that vision some backing, if you will. And you have a senior deployment champion. And the senior deployment champion, they lead the CI, the continuous improvement programs within their sphere of influence. So these folks, they help identify the projects that we're going to be working on. Sometimes if we're on the front lines, we don't have all the information. I don't know all the key performance indicators in and out that the business has. I would like to say that I do, but let's be honest, in most cases we don't. We do our jobs, we have a general idea what's happening at the business level, but we don't a lot of times align that. And that's where the senior deployment champion can help make sure that we're selecting the right projects to work on, because when you have the right projects, you're more likely to get the resources that you need. So they're going to help you to remove some barriers too, give us the right time, effort. And I call these like the shield, if you will, the shield from higher. If there's some arrows coming down, they're going to put the shield out for you and protect you from them. Maybe that could be just protecting your time so you can actually, accomplish the project that you're working on. And then you have the deployment champion. And this is the day-to-day operations of the continuous improvement program. They gain buy-in from leaders. They're the ones who are talking to the executives on your behalf, making sure they're informed, they know what's going on. So when you develop your communication plan, keeping the deployment champion involved is very important for making sure that you have support for all the different levels within the organization. So when we're dealing with this, the senior deployment champion and the deployment champion, so this is just kind of going from book answer to real life. A lot of times in organizations as we get started up, those two can be the same person. Now, obviously, that's not recommended. You want to have all these people on this chart, but to be honest with you, a lot of times we see that. So you'll just see one champion, if you will, and one sponsor. And then we have the process owner. And a process owner obviously goes without saying how important they are. The process owner owns that process you're working on. You don't. And then the group we're working with, our process improvement team, they don't own the process. So at the end of the day, keeping this person in the room with you, or at least keeping them informed on essentially, as needed, we'll say almost daily basis, at the end of the day when the process improvement effort is over, who owns that process? They do. They have to see it through. So anything that's going to happen at that process, they're your first line of defense. So you need to make sure that they know what's going on every step of the way. They're very, very critical. They may be very busy folks, understood, but invite them to all of your meetings, and ideally they can be there because they can also help you to manage expectations. You may think that you want to be doing, we want to go route A, but they say, well, you can't because, we're restricted resources over here or whatever it may be, but they can help to manage that expectation up front. So these are your core fundamental teams. There are some more players that we can have, and we'll talk about those in Black Belt too, and a little bit bigger, more extensive hierarchy and structure. But these are some key players that you're going to need to know who's who. Well, what about on our team specifically now? So switching from leadership to our team, one of the people that we found to be the most important, groups of folks, are the IT folks. So in the past, I'll say 5, maybe 10 years, I would tell you that a lot of our projects were beginning to stall a few years ago. Well, why? Because IT was not in the room. We would come up with solutions all the way down to solutioning, and we're saying, yep, we want to automate this and get this new level of code to do this. And guess what? IT's backed up for a year. And that's truthful. We have clients who have IT departments backed up for an entire year and a half. When that happens, guess what? Your project, either A, you need to go back to the drawing board and you wasted all that time when you could have just had IT invited to these meetings. And again, this is managing expectations as well. And also they can provide you resources you may not have realized that you had at your fingertips. So IT, this is still on the additional team members, but I would argue that when we get away from book answer here again, in real life, I want an IT member, at least a representative from the IT department. I want them on my team. Every time we have a meeting, the entire time. Even if they don't know Lean or Six Sigma or anything like that, they are critical for a lot of the stuff that we're trying to get done. I mean, think about it. We're trying to clean up the process. We're trying to optimize that process, and in most cases, automate most of it, or the steps that we can. Well, I need IT to get that done. Having somebody there for finance. So this becomes important, as you're rolling this out as an enterprise. Well, you want to make sure that you're documenting what your return on investment is. And also, maybe this program this project is going to cross over in a couple of quarters. Well, what's the budget that we have allocated to us? So having a finance person is really good to keep in and around the team. And also HR. How are we going to do the reward system when we're done with the project? How is this going to help with career transition and the career path that folks have? So IT, I would almost say, put an asterisk by that and call it, I would actually call that required, but it's up to your organization. And then finance and HR, those are definitely, I suggest that you have them at least well informed from the beginning. So let's talk about the different levels now that we've talked, we've talked about the leadership, we've talked about the different team members that we have available or we should have on our team. Well, now within the team on the front line, we need to have our belts for Lean Six Sigma. And so the different levels of practitioners, we have the green belt. What's expected at the green belt level? At the green belt level, you're there to help black belts. That's what you do. You know a subset of the tools, techniques, methodologies, frameworks, so you know a little bit. And I call it, enough just to be dangerous, which is awesome. So you go in there and you can help out. You can help create the process maps, the charters, all these different tools. and you can help the project move along. I kind of call them the worker bees on the front line. And in some cases, you can lead smaller scoped projects. Black belts. Black belts are really where you get into the data analytics piece. So when we get into the more complex problems, not only are they coaching and mentoring green belts, but they're dealing with heavy data analytics. A lot of times they're running the statistical analysis. So these are great folks that you want to have on complex problems where there's going to be a lot of data, and especially having some around with a little bit more experience. So to have that data tell you a story and to translate and interpret the data, that's where the black belts really step up. And they also work hand in hand with that process owner because they're probably a little bit more senior. And then you get up to the master black belt level. Master black belt levels are there to be doing the training, the coaching, the mentoring. They're going to be looking at from the strategic level, they're going to be looking at the training across the organization, what customizations they need to make for this organization. So the really high level projects, they're going to be coordinating across the entire enterprise. And then also they're going to be assisting with project selection. So they're going to be doing a lot of that project selection with senior leadership. Maybe it's executives or directors or vice presidents or whatever, but the master black belts are there to help make sure that there's a lot of that alignment. So master black belts are doing a lot of enterprise level work. So those are the levels that we actually have at on your team that you have available to you. So naturally, what we have next is what type of process improvement efforts do we have? So when we're talking about these projects that we're going to be working on, the project selection that the master black belts are helping you with, what are they? Well, there's really a few that we work on. One is a blitz Kaizen. A blitz Kaizen is usually done within about 30 days or less. It's, hey, solve this problem. You're dedicated to that problem. You're getting probably pulled away from your everyday work, and you're saying, this is the issue right here, and you got about 30 days to solve it. It's very tight scope. So in the mortgage lending process, maybe it's just talking about from the time the initial the package is initially submitted by the member online, all the way until the loan officer makes first contact with that particular customer. Okay, well, that's a nice, smaller, tight scope. And there's a lot of systems in there and stuff, but it's tight. Data's easily attainable, and you have dedicated personnel. Like I said, you're not working on 2 other projects. You're not doing your day job for 6 hours and just dedicating 2 hours to this. A blitz Kaizen means that you're dedicated. And leadership says, whatever you need, we're here. We're going to get those resources for you. And that looks the same in the traditional Kaizen, except it's just a little bit longer. So the scope might be a little bit more, and maybe the data is a little bit harder to get, or maybe it's a little scattered, and you got to make sure you put together a good data collection plan. Maybe you got to scrub through the databases, you got to look at the data pedigree, and just put a little more time and effort into it. So that looks like a 7-week cycle. It's 3 weeks of prep, and then usually for about a week, you're in, whether it's a Teams meeting or a Zoom call or in a conference room, but you're dedicating about a week to solve the problem. So you've framed it, you set it up, solve it for that 1 week, and then you follow through for about 3 weeks. And then you get into the more traditional projects that you see. And these are actually done a lot less by green belts, a little bit more, you're talking black belt, maybe master black belt. And in most organizations, they actually shy away from them. I mean, 3 to 6 month projects, not many people want to be doing 3 to 6 month projects. Usually when we get assigned projects, they tell us we want it done. And when? Oh, yesterday, right? And we see that all the time. I want this done yesterday. Okay, Roger, got it, understood. That's how most projects work. That is not a 3 to 6 month project. So you're going to see a lot less of these in our industry. But when they do, there's usually not much data on it. You have no idea what the root cause is. It's just, hey, solve this problem. And you kind of go, hey, we got a blank slate, got a toolkit. We've learned a lot about Lean and Six Sigma. We've gone to the courses. It's time to put it into action. But I don't really know where to start right now. Let's just go do an initial discovery and then charter this up. Right? That's going to be your 3 to 6 month project. It's going to take you a while to get it done. So those are the typical projects that we will see, or the different type of events, if you will. In summary, what we've come up with is we think about this. Success depends on buy-in at all levels. So we've got to have buy-in and participation at all the levels in order for this to work out well. And then also know who's who. You know, who's the sponsor, who's the champion, who's the process owner, who are the green belts, the black belts, who are the right subject matter experts. So really knowing who's who in the zoo is going to help you to pick the right people to be on your team and to report to the right people in your communication plan. And finally, what we covered here was choosing the right level of effort. I don't want to turn everything into a 3 to 6 month project. If I can turn, the assignment that I have into a Blitz Kaizen, I would rather do that. I would rather do it in more agile, if you will. Think about the concept of doing a Kaizen and then another Kaizen and then another Kaizen and getting these incremental improvements, hence the word Kaizen. It means incremental improvements. So I would rather be doing the Kaizen model than the 3 to 6 months. So I'll break them down. So try to choose the right level of effort. Don't turn everything into a big, what they call, science project, right? Not everything needs to be a 3 to 6 month project. So if we can Kaizen and roll it out and do a small incremental improvement, that's the way to go. But if there's just really complex, it's going to take us a while to get done, then by all means, it's a project. But make sure that we're choosing the right tools, the right level of effort, and that, my friends, is going to help you to establish a good process improvement or continuous improvement culture within your organization. And that summarizes Lean Six Sigma and the organization. I'll see you next time.